And we're a little late. We're a little left over. After all, it's April 21st, the day after April 20th, 420. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another really live edition of Green Rush Live, the business of cannabis talk show that we do every Friday afternoon here on Pro Cannabis Media. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. So happy to bring in our pals from Normal. One in Michigan, the executive director, a regular contributor to We Talk News. His name is Rick Thompson. Hello, Rick Thompson.
Hi, Jimmy. I'm always happy to do this show. It's a big fun.
Appreciate it. And then, of course, we have Morgan Fox on the third Friday of every month, and he is back with us again from Washington, D.C. Hello, Morgan.
Hey, Jimmy. Sorry, it took me a day to find my bong.
That's by the way, I got to ask, is anybody left over from 420? You catch my drift? We don't call them hangovers, right? It's a leftover buzz when you wake up on April 21st. I don't know about you, but that was my story this morning.
Well, I'll tell you what, the unlicensed weed stores in my neighborhood were open at 9 a.m., which just shows you that cannabis consumers do have hustle. But also, I personally and most of the people that are involved in cannabis policy advocacy were running all day yesterday, all throughout the halls of Congress. And that'll beat you up.
I jumped out of bed and sang with the birds this morning. I don't know about you, but
wait. Sing with the birds now. Come on.
Sing with the birds. Yes, it's not very good. I chase the birds away is really what I do, but I hate to phrase it that way.
I get it. All right. Well, we're going to have a very interesting show today because what I did is ask all the people who regularly contribute to our We Talk News show to join us for a 15-minute segment to find out what went on in your state or their state during 420, and if these activities and festivities are actually extending through the weekend. And we'll hear from a few of our correspondents from coast to coast. But we're going to start off talking with Morgan because he was a very busy guy yesterday because there was some like a full court press on 420 on reform. Am I right, Morgan?
Absolutely. And just like speaking as somebody that has spent a lot of time dealing with journalists, I'm really glad that you organized this well in advance, because I cannot tell you how many emails I got from journalists who are not on the cannabis beat early yesterday morning saying, "Oh, we've got a 2:30 deadline. Let's get you on a segment." I mean, it is what it is. But yesterday was a really, really important day in DC for a number of reasons. It was really the culmination of a significant amount of legislation that has been introduced over the last couple of weeks. We had a couple of weeks ago the Veterans Equal Access Act be introduced by Representative Blumenauer and Representative Mast. And then we had the
Prepare Act?
The Prepare Act I'll talk about later. But
okay.
And honestly, the Prepare Act is symbolic and great, but we already know how to regulate cannabis. And I feel like passing that legislation and using political capital to do so is going to actually push the timeline a little bit farther. Not to mention the fact that the DOJ is in charge of convening that committee. And, we know that while the current DOJ has been relatively friendly to cannabis, I am not certain that the people that they would put on that committee would have a really solid idea about how to regulate cannabis at the federal level, absent the participation of advocates and people in the industry. But aside from that, we also saw the introduction of the Small Business Tax Equity Act, which would kill 280E for cannabis businesses. And then we saw the reintroduction of the HOPE Act, which would provide $20 million in federal funding over the course of 10 years to help facilitate state and local grant programs, basically, to help expedite expungement and otherwise conviction relief processes at the state level, where the vast majority of cannabis arrests have occurred. And then we saw the reintroduction in both chambers of the VA Medical Cannabis Safe Harbor Act, which basically does the same thing as the Equal Access Act, but it has a 5-year window. That's kind of a mixed bag because it's in both chambers and has, broad bipartisan support in the House, Democrats and one independent in the Senate, but it's in both chambers and stands a chance of moving with Chuck Schumer at the helm. And then we expect to see a number of other bills be introduced in the very near future, not least of which will be safe banking in the Senate.
It just won't go away, safe banking, right?
It's not.
It's a necessary. They need, everybody still needs it. I was in New York City yesterday for 420. That too was an experience. I mean, there literally was a party on every corner in New York City, and there's a lot of corners in the Big Apple, as you know. Rick Thompson, I'm gonna guess you're ready to rock, and you can ask your fellow normal guy anything you want. Go ahead.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about those unlicensed shops in your neighborhood, Morgan. There's a huge segment of our industry, a huge segment of the cannabis purchasing population that derives their sourcing from the unregulated market. What do you see as far as a national strategy to try and migrate those people from their unregulated cannabis sources into the regulated market? Or is there just no federal strategy at this point on that?
Well, it's definitely a major concern at the federal level, but I think that a lot of people that are looking at this issue are looking at it in the wrong way. You look at the language of the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act, it sets like a graded tax rate that goes up to 25% eventually. And that is basically what a lot of small businesses are already paying under 280E. And even if, a lot of businesses are paying up to like 70, 80, 90% federal taxes under 280E. But that sort of a tax rate is really not considering the fact that there is already a pervasive unregulated market. DC is a little bit of a unicorn when it comes to this issue because the district has allowed legal cannabis for adult use and legal home cultivation, but it has been prevented by Congress from actually regulating the adult use system. And very recently, the city council passed a measure, two measures actually, which are super important. The first was the Second Chance Act, which basically provides for automatic expungement of anybody that was convicted of behavior that is now legal under DC law, as well as some other things that are maybe not so legal under DC law, but that happened long enough in the past. And the second was an expansion of the existing medical program that basically opens the doors to all of these unlicensed regulators to become licensed and get their ducks in a row, be inspected, make sure that they're in line with all of the policies that the DC government has set in place. And because the Harris Rider, which has prevented DC from regulating adult use programs, doesn't touch medical, the fact that all these organizations and all these businesses are being roped into the medical program and the license caps have been removed, the barriers to entry have been significantly lowered, and there is an active urgency on the part of the city to bring all of these unregulated operators into the fold and make them regulated, hold them accountable, make sure that they are following all the rules and doing so in a way that is not financially burdensome for them. I think that we're going to see a complete sea change in what the DC cannabis scene looks like. And unfortunately, because of Congress, we can't necessarily just do this in a straightforward manner. We have to just expand the medical program to be as accessible as possible. Now, unfortunately, if you're just a random person who doesn't have a card in another city or another state, and you aren't a resident, then you might have some hoops to jump through in order to be able to legally buy cannabis from some of these newly licensed facilities. But the fact is that there's an active pursuit on the part of the city government to bring all of these gray market businesses that were created by congressional intransigence into the fold and make them regulated and give them some oversight and make sure that their products are tested, make sure that they are doing everything that they can to follow all the rules and to be good stewards of their neighborhoods. And honestly, I think that DC government is doing the absolute best they can in the face of congressional committee in particular that is trying to use DC as a bully pulpit to push their values that they can't necessarily get passed through Congress or in their own states on a district that they don't even really live in.
I got my start in the unregulated market too, from 2009 to 2012 with Big Daddies. We had a chain of 5 unregulated market dispensaries here in the state of Michigan, and a variety of different things ended up shutting us down. But there are quite a few different unregulated market guys in Michigan that were able to successfully make the transition from that world into the regulated marketplace and are now doing extremely well. Plus, some of the players, even if the businesses didn't survive, the knowledge base from the unregulated market was there to help seed the regulated market and really gave us a step up. Michigan is experiencing a huge increase right now with a 16% jump in sales in March over February. But Morgan, previously on an episode that we were on together, you'd mentioned that it would be very difficult to foresee positive cannabis law reform getting through the House of Representatives based on its current leadership structure. Have you gotten any optimism since that time? Are we happier, or maybe thinking that we might get something good done this year?
Well, I want to go back to something you said a second ago. That 16% rise really represents sales that are not taking place in the unregulated market. So anytime we see that, that is generally a sign that consumers are moving towards the regulated market. And that largely happens when you remove barriers to entry to get into the market to be able to produce and provide cannabis. And we're seeing the exact same thing in DC. When it comes to the federal level, I still think that there is a significant appetite to be able to move at least incremental legislation across the finish line. Everybody's looking at safe banking, but there is a lot of bipartisan legislation in the House right now that is pushing for veterans access and protections, for expungement, for additional research, and this is just the beginning.
Right.
I think we're going to see a lot more legislation coming across the board, especially in the House, and which is kind of surprising because it's a Republican-led House. And I think that really speaks to the strength and cohesiveness of the Congressional Cannabis Caucus, which is bipartisan, and the folks that are chairing that are really pulling the strings and making sure that they can get bipartisan support in the House for pretty much any bill that they introduce. And it's going to move us a little bit farther down the road towards eventually ending prohibition. Cannabis prohibition or cannabis policy reform, rather, has always been an incremental task. We get people a little bit more comfortable with, moving an inch down the road. And then once they see that they don't get any political blowback from that, and that the things that were instituted by those laws were successful, then they're more comfortable moving a little bit farther down the road. And particularly in a Congress that is split camerally, as well as a very, very near split within both chambers, there's not going to be a lot of opportunity for anybody to pass really substantive legislation about anything. But cannabis policy reform is one of those areas where the majority of the public on both sides of the aisle supports this, and anybody that is ignoring that is going to face the consequences of that come November next year.
Yeah, let's see that happen. Hey, what's going on with the descheduling, rescheduling with the DOJ? There seems to be some scuttlebutt around that the Cole memo might actually be reinstated in some way, which would keep the feds away from the states. If they take cannabis off controlled, that Schedule 1, doesn't that open up the banks?
Descheduling would solve a lot of the problems that exist with federal prohibition. Things like banking, 280E, interstate commerce, et cetera. The problem is doing that blanket without any sort of a regulatory structure might create a whole lot of other problems. So we have to do it thoughtfully. But the bottom line is that I don't think that the DOJ is going to do that, because actually it's not just the DOJ, it's the DEA that holds final sway over the scheduling. And if Health and Human Services and Chairman Becerra or Director Becerra decides to suggest or recommend that cannabis be descheduled, that doesn't mean that the DEA has to listen to that. And we've actually seen this happen before multiple times over the last couple of decades, where the DEA got recommendations from both their own administrative law judges, from people within the DEA structure, from people in the larger DEA, from people at Health and Human Services, to change the schedule of cannabis. And they have flat out ignored it. And they've actually gone to court to solidify their right to do so. And courts, of course, ruled in favor of the DEA. So the bottom line is whether or not the DEA is going to listen to any sort of recommendations from HHS and the other organizations that are currently reviewing cannabis's schedule on the Controlled Substances Act. Now, I'm also concerned that that recommendation might come out as something like rescheduling, moving it down to 2 or 3 or 4. None of these would actually remove the state federal conflict. So honestly, this is going to have to come from Congress. But the fact that they're actually reviewing it and that there is a significant scientific review going on about the harms and potential benefits of cannabis and about its effects on society are actually going on is very heartening to me. It's very rare to have that being done in a positive direction with the green light stamp of the president. But I don't think that it's going to actually result in anything concrete. That being said, symbolically, as well as the fact that the administrators and high-level agency personnel in these different departments are going to be looking at this through a different lens, is incredibly important when we're looking at long-term change.
What about Schedule 6? There's a new move to create a brand new schedule added to the list of controlled substances, a 6, which would be the absolute lowest level of threshold. What advantages would that offer, but also what restrictions would that still contain?
To tell you the truth, I've seen some of those sales pitches, and I honestly think that they're being pushed by groups like Project SAM as well as profiteers who are trying to get extra lobbying dollars for whatever. It's not even something that we should be considering. And to tell you the truth, we should not accept anything other than descheduling. There's currently a bill in the House right now, introduced by Representative Greg Steube from Florida, who has really actually been pretty solid on this issue in the past. And unfortunately, he's still recuperating from a massive fall off of a ladder early this year. But he introduced a bill called the Marijuana 1 to 3 Act, which would automatically reschedule cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. And NORML is opposing that bill because Schedule 3, Schedule 4, Schedule 5, cannabis does not belong on the schedule of controlled substances. And no matter what the schedule is, it will create additional barriers to instituting sensible cannabis policy at both the federal and state level, and will not actually remove the conflict between those two sets of laws.
Good for you.
Hey, one more thing I got to ask you about the race to 22. Right now, you've got 21 adult use legal states in the United States, and a governor of a real teeny weeny little state is sitting there with the bill that's been passed twice on his desk. And I thought that by now the power of the veto of the governor would have passed even if he didn't sign it. And I'm talking about the state of Delaware. I'm sure you understand what's going on there, Morgan. Is this guy, this is Governor John Carney, I'm pretty sure is his name. At this point, isn't it supposed to be law according to that state's constitution? In other words, he didn't veto it, but he ignored it. And because both the House and the Senate have passed it, it's supposed to be law, isn't it?
Well, this is actually a pretty complex issue. There's 2 bills. The first one legalizes cannabis possession and I believe minor home cultivation. And the second bill actually sets up a regulatory structure. The governor has until Saturday to either veto or approve or allow to pass without a signature the first bill on Saturday.
Okay.
And then the regulatory bill he has until the middle of next week. Now, Governor Carney has previously vetoed these bills, and we thought we had a veto-proof majority, and it turned out when he vetoed it, we didn't. Now, I tend to think that he is going to allow the simple possession law to go into effect on Saturday without his signature.
Yep.
I don't know what he's going to do about the regulatory bill, and it's entirely possible that he will see which way the wind is blowing. He's been making a lot of statements on kind of like all sides that are pretty vague. He says that this is where the direction of the state is going, so I shouldn't interfere. But then he's also like raising tons of concerns about it. So it's difficult to tell exactly what he's going to do about the regulatory bill. If he decides to veto it, there is a veto-proof majority that approved it. But that doesn't mean that in the interim, he hasn't pulled some strings and pulled some of the votes to not actually override his veto.
Just to let you know, Delaware Online is reporting that Governor Carney has allowed those two bills to become law without his signature. So that was updated 41 minutes ago. So that's great for all of us.
All right.
Let's celebrate, right? That's a great, we have a 22nd state now then.
Well, let's slow our rolls here. Let's make sure that we verify and confirm, but that's still pretty great. And also, I mean, I don't want to say necessarily that this will influence the president, but I hope that it will at least nudge him in the right direction if he can see legal adult use cannabis stores, when he's going on vacation or, going back home. So,
right.
Fingers crossed. Let's confirm this and see what's going on, and then we'll go from there.
That's why I love doing live news. Rick breaks that story. I freaking love it, man. I love it. Hey, Morgan, we love you too. And we appreciate your regular appearances on this show. You're welcome anytime, of course. And I'm now trying to figure out how the hell I get down to DC for lobby days. There's about 3 different conflicts on my schedule right now already. But I really want to come down there anyway, because I want to see my brother and my great nieces and nephews that are down there. Anyway,
Jimmy, you can come down anytime and I'll lobby with you.
Oh, now we're talking. That I like that idea for sure. And there's another guy from the NCIA who's dying, I think, to hang out with me. You know who I'm talking about. Michael's invited me down a million times. So maybe we'll see that happen. But Morgan, again, thank you so much. We got a little bit of a late start today. Apologies for that. We're a little bit post our 420, but after all, it's 421 and we're on leftover time. Anyway, we're going to continue with more of our We Talk News staff as we go coast to coast and find out what every state did on 420 as Green Rush Live continues after this. Don't go away.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm gonna sit down in my rented car. I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on every night and day. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God Jonathan Edwards is joining us live in the WSCA studios.
Welcome back to the day after 420 live Green Rush program here on Pro Cannabis Media. We're here every Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock Eastern until 6 p.m. We usually follow our really live Business of Cannabis talk show with our weekly Weed Talk News show anchored by Elena Pinto at 6 p.m. However, because it was 420 yesterday, the last thing I want to do is ask the people who are so great about contributing to our program to do anything other than just relax on 420 and join us. And Marianne Kersigi is with us now from Oregon. Hi, Marianne. How are you?
Hey, Jimmy, I'm great. Happy day after 420 to you.
That's right. I call it a leftover, not a hangover, a leftover.
There you
I
go.
wake up the next day and I'm still under the influence or I'm a little high. I'm like, oh, I got a leftover today. Tell us a little bit about what you do, Alibi Cannabis. Come on, let's build a little brand here. Tell us what you've been up to in Oregon.
Happy to. So as you know, Oregon has been licensing cannabis farms for a very long time. In cannabis years. We got our license in 2017. We're an indoor top tier farm. We produce regularly every month, top quality strains. We've got some unique genetics and we have flower and pre-rolls, infused pre-rolls, and all kinds of stuff to keep the Oregon consumers happy.
I like the idea of that infused pre-roll. I'm going out on a limb thinking that Rick Thompson knows exactly what I'm talking about when it's an infused pre-roll, right, Rick?
Well, infused pre-rolls are one of the hottest growing sectors of the market here in Michigan. Of course, people love cannabis flower, but having a new and inventive way to consume cannabis concentrates with the flower, it's actually very attractive. And sometimes the terps that are added back in really do enhance your whole experience. So those type of pre-rolls are extremely popular in our market here, and I imagine in Oregon as well.
Yep, absolutely.
How do you infuse the live plant?
You don't. So there are a number of techniques. Rick probably knows more, similar to me, but we, what we do for ours is we take our flower, so our bee bud. We don't use trim in any of our pre-rolls. So we take our flower and we grind it up, and then we take a concentrate. So from our own trim. So you take the trim and you concentrate it down, you get the oil. Mm-hmm. There are a number of ways to do that. You can do that solventless to make hash, which is popular. Or you can use traditional solvents and make full spectrum oil, add that back. So you end up with this slurry of mixture of ground flour and oil, and then make joints out of that.
Yeah. I know I go to a medical dispensary here in Massachusetts. I think they call that the boom stick, and the boom stick at Sierra Naturals. But Marianne, Oregon's had a mixed kind of history with this cannabis plant because every state, by the way, has screwed it up. Let's face it.
Some of them worse than others, but all in their own ways.
I mean, and by the way, New York is going through that right now, okay, and New Jersey too. It's almost like, it's not even the inmates running the asylum. It's people that have no idea what the asylum's all about. That being said, what are some of the lessons the state has learned that you would like to see other states perhaps pick up and not have to go through what you guys did in Oregon when you had like an overabundance of flower at one point?
Well, I think the biggest thing that we have hopefully learned is limited licenses. And this is, I don't understand why it's so problematic for people to understand. But as you know, when we grow stuff inside a state, it has to stay inside that state. So by definition, it's not an open market, and it's very, very much not an open market. So having limited licenses is the only way for operators to succeed and thrive, especially small craft operators, which Oregon is very much a craft cannabis state. We don't have a lot of large MSOs that have made it here in Oregon. Most large ones have pulled out. And so limited licenses is one thing that Oregon has done right. They didn't do it right initially, but I think we've gotten there. There are a number of things which we can talk about if you want, about things that we're still not doing right, where Oregon's falling behind some other states, which makes me sad. But I think that the message is that we all need to learn from each other, and hopefully we can compare notes and come to a common platform for federal legalization.
Yeah, let's hopefully live to see that day, but it may still be quite a ways away.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned interstate commerce, and I'm pretty sure that Washington, Oregon, and California have all kind of agreed that, yeah, maybe we can start to do interstate commerce amongst themselves. Am I missing that? Am I right about that?
You're totally right. And there is actually a lawsuit in place right now where some attorneys have sued the Oregon governor to allow that. Like you said, the governors have signed off on this deal, and I'm not a lawyer, so I just understand the basics of it. But the feds still say that they control that. So until some lawyer comes down with some opinion, or the governor, somebody's got to be that first person to make that step. And I don't know who it's going to be.
Yeah. And Rick, you and I know have talked about this too. The fact that there's no legal interstate commerce is a bit of a hypocrisy, because manufacturers can take these recipes from one state, use the same cultivar, and create it in another state. Am I right?
You are right. And in fact, almost all states, all states that have medical or adult use regulations require that all the cannabis is produced inside there. Part of what was contained within the Cole Memorandum itself was an agreement that the federal government wouldn't mess with states that had their own individual cannabis laws, provided that they adhered to 8 different sets of guidelines, one of which was to not allow transfer of cannabis across state lines too. So we look for the Cole Memorandum and that concept to protect us from federal interference. But it's also true that there are state compacts, groups of contiguous states who've made an agreement to perhaps do something like this. California, Oregon, and Washington, great example there. And I know there's one in the East Coast as well too. It'll be curious to see whether they pass muster, or if that compact becomes realized, what the federal response will be to that.
Yeah.
Another interesting dynamic to that is that there are some tribes that have gotten into the cannabis business. And so there are some people on the tribal side of things who think that they might be able to transfer from one tribe, let's say in Oregon, to a tribe in, say, New York, because there are intertribal transfers that are already carved out.
And God love humanity, because we always look for ways around the rules. Isn't that like, well, it's like, right? Am I right? And it's happening. I mean, it's happening. But the one thing that's so hypocritical, again, but they won't let you transfer flour across state lines. New Jersey obviously has very high prices right now because the demand, the supply just isn't there. And Massachusetts has an overabundance of cannabis right now, and they were selling joints for $90 on 420 here in Massachusetts. Look at Rick's face.
$90
$90, correct. 90.
Now, one thing that's not prevented, though, is that people crossing state lines in order to obtain cannabis from other states. So even though there's not a legal trade of cannabis going back and forth, there are so much bleed from expensive states coming to non-expensive states. Here in Michigan, we share a border with Ohio, Indiana, and Wisconsin, but we get a ton of people that come from Illinois as well. And it's estimated between 14 to 20% of our total overall sales of 250 million every single month now comes from out-of-state purchasers. So in the absence of permissible transfers of the way that Marianne described them, people are still finding a way to get their own on their own.
And
And
always, go ahead. Mary.
I'll bet that the Ohio regulations that don't allow inhalables also impact your market, because people going across the border to get flour that's not otherwise available to them in Ohio.
We definitely benefit from other people's stupidity. There's no question about it. Pennsylvania does not have a very ideal law. Illinois still has a pretty high tax bracket, so that provides an incentive for people to come across. Our border cities that have regulated market dispensaries in them are booming.
Mm-hmm.
So what was 420 like in Oregon yesterday, Marianne? Were there lots of parties, specials? What goes on in Oregon on 420?
There is so much that goes on. Pretty much every dispensary has some sort of deal. We staffed 420 parties at 2 different dispensaries, and it was really fun to talk to customers, have that direct customer facing, find out what people are looking for, what they like. Dispensaries had block parties, live bands, DJs. There's specials all over. It was a lot of fun.
And I think I saw a poll that was taken. 40% of regular users of cannabis had decided they would take a personal day on 420. We'll never see the day where it's a national holiday. Let's face it, guys. But at least our government knows the significance of the date, because they had all those meetings on Capitol Hill, which, again, as Morgan Fox just told us, these are good signs of as we move towards some kind of reform at the federal level. Are you confident, Marianne?
In what? Confidence?
That we're going to see federal reform in our lifetime, let alone this year?
Every time I make a prediction, I'm wrong. So I've given up making predictions. I truly think that deschedulings or rescheduling is not going to happen anytime soon. But I hope that the 280E changes that are afoot, I really hope that those go through, because that could make a huge difference to these struggling cannabis companies.
Can you put a percentage on the impact it might have on your own business if you were able to write off regular business expenses like every other business in America?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, we have to be
30%, 40%, 10%. You?
Overhead is probably, I'm just going to throw out a number. Let's just say 25%.
Okay.
Which I think is probably fairly, on the cultivation side, we're a little bit lower. If we had a dispensaries are even higher that they're disallowed. So dispensaries, their effective tax rate's like 60%, which is insane.
Absolutely. And what are some of the changes you'd like to see this year in Oregon legislation or rules by the, you have a commission, a regulatory commission in Oregon, yes?
We do, as dysfunctional as it is, but yes, we do.
Wait a minute. Is there a functional regulatory by the way, not even in cannabis? Let's just take the whole, alphabet soup of Washington, D.C. But what are some of the things that you think you could see happening that would improve the business environment for the industry in your state?
There are a couple of things that are on the slate for this year. The first one is consumption. So we do not have a carve out in Oregon law for consumption, and Oregon has the strictest. We have an indoor clean air act. So basically, no place are you allowed to smoke anything indoors. Whether it's cigarettes or weed or whatever. And so the only way to get around that is to have private clubs, but the government has even shut those down. So in Portland, I know of 2, which is, it's ridiculous.
What was the reason? What, against the rules? I mean, what's the reason that they're saying we don't want private clubs? Seems to me there would be a lawsuit for that. I mean, can you actually dictate what goes on behind closed, locked doors?
Yep, and that's what the Oregon Indoor Clean Air Act, and it's been around. It's not a weed act. It's been around for decades, and it's to my understanding one of the strongest regulations in the country. And the idea is that the health the health authority in Oregon is really strong. So they
Mhm.
make all of these attempts at improving health, which on the surface are good. But then when you dig down and you understand the impacts on regular people is it really is detrimental. So you have people who, if you don't own your own home, you're not allowed to smoke inside. So you're not even allowed to smoke outside. It's not like New York where you can just walk down the street and hang out in a park and light one up. You just here in Oregon you just can't, and it's detrimental to the patients and people who use it for medical purposes as well as regular consumers.
Right. And are people still getting? It's a misdemeanor, I'm guessing, if you get caught smoking outside. Am I right?
Probably, I think so. I can't imagine that people actually enforce it. We have so many other important things in terms of homelessness that and crime and all of that. But
Yeah.
I haven't heard of anybody being cited recently. But you know, for those of us who try to abide by the rules, you know, why would you do something on purpose that you know is not right?
Exactly right. And Lord knows generations have done it, you know, around the corner, in the back, in the alley. They'll figure out a way to consume it somehow, some way.
Behind
It's
the garage, you know, wherever.
lots of garage smoke. Yes, indeed. Hey, Marianne, I don't want to keep you anymore because I told you 15 minutes and I want to stick to that. And I really appreciate you taking the time on a Friday afternoon. We so love the fact how consistent your reports are. And please, thank you from the entire Pro Cannabis Media family for your work.
Absolutely. I really appreciate it, Jimmy, and have an awesome evening and happy weekend to both of you.
You bet. Take care now.
Okay, bye.
All right. I think we are waiting for one more coming in before 5 o'clock, and it might be Pam Schmiel from New York, our newest New York correspondent. At least that's kind of what I have penciled in here. But you never know, Rick, who's going to show up and who's not at the right time. So right now it's you and me to fill for a couple of minutes. And I want to get your impressions of some of the stories that Marianne told. And look at that, by the way, talk about timing. Good. There's Pam now. Hi, Pam.
Hello.
Well, on cue too. That was very good. Because there used to be a time when I'd have a little voice in my ear and it would tell me Pam's in the waiting room or 30 seconds or whatever. No, this is live. This is about as live a conversation as you possibly can get on the internet. Pam Schmiel, thank you so much from New York City. Hey, I was in New York City yesterday and I didn't run into you. I'm shocked.
Yeah, shocking. I was in Brooklyn. Where were you?
You know what? I went Upper East Side. Okay, I was at the Upper East Side, courtesy of my pal Rick Granoff from Smoking Interiors and Upwise Capital. They had a luncheon. About 100 people were there, and a nice mix of people too, I might add. You had construction people, you had investors there, you had media people there. It was a good 2.5 minute spiel about what we've done here. Pam.
Okay.
420, I looked in New York City, 420 New York City activities. There was at least 100 activities going on. And I don't even think that, I bet that's an underestimation.
Yeah, I mean, I just focused on one, but I also had my hand on another one in New Jersey. But the one that I came across and spent some time with the organizer is a legacy grower, 17 years legacy grower, master grower here in the city, looking to maybe enter the legal market, but probably not because it's, such a high bar, which seems to be the word out there, why no one is really wanting to get in. No big surprise. But one thing that I really noticed about this event yesterday, and what I notice about a trend that's happening here, is that there's these farmer market style events happening. So in addition to the competition with the storefronts, the illegal storefronts, there's now a lot of competition growing in the farmers market style. But the difference is the farmers markets are the legacy growers. They're the craft growers growing in New York State. They're not products, falling off the truck out of California. Right. And people, the connoisseurs were there. I mean, they were sniffing and, I wouldn't smoke that with this paper. I mean, they just dabs and everything you could imagine. Everyone was there, and the best, the best of the best. And so that's kind of the difference between the two worlds that are popping up around here, but it's definitely a trend that's happening. And I know I've heard it around the rest of the country as well.
You do Michigan farmers markets, Rick?
We used to before the 2016 MMFLA, but that was a really big growth spurt in our industry was the unregulated market storefronts as well as the unregulated market farmers markets too. And some of the people that were successful there have translated into the regulated market and are now doing extremely well. So that's just a necessary step in the evolution as far as I'm concerned to go from completely unregulated into a quasi, regulated, unregulated market combo.
Right, but one of the big, and I definitely, there were people there building their brand. They were all branded product, but everyone I've spoken to at this event and a couple other farmers markets really have no desire to jump into the market because of the cost. They're building their own, unless they get rid of these markets, maybe that's a telltale sign if we follow what you guys did. I don't know how they absorb into the market if they don't want to get in there. I don't know. It's just I didn't meet many who were actively seeking licenses, and there were a lot of products there.
We had 500 unregulated market storefronts at the high point here in Michigan, and then the law changed, and then all the local communities just stopped tolerating them, and then it went from where we were at a beautiful scenario to a much more regulated thing as we transitioned from a completely outlaw kind of a scenario into a more regulated system. And back at that time, medical marijuana was all we had in Michigan. So they were all medical marijuana storefronts that were being opened. So it took statewide action in order to stop that.
Well, that's interesting. I thought this was like a train out of control, that was going to be like a new thing, but maybe that'll all shake out at the end. That's kind of
Local prosecutors, local city councils have so much power in this. What they choose to allow in their communities, they can choose to disallow just as easily.
Well, here in New York, they're going after the landlords of these illegal storefronts, which is, I honestly, I called that like months ago. I couldn't even believe that wasn't even talked about, but that's really the only way that they can do it. So it's just starting. So we don't know how that's playing out yet. So that was my 420.
That was your, and so I stayed in Times Square at the Moxie Hotel, which I really actually enjoyed. And I went outside this morning. I turned to my right on 7th Avenue, okay, and there was Weed World. Okay, Weed World was there, and I'm like, well, obviously the landlord could give a damn that he has a weed shop in his place, and they'll pay. This is the problem, because you've got the fines and the margins of the unregulated business. It's a wash. It's like a cost of business. I don't know.
Yeah.
It
It's
is
a hard sell here to get people to go into the shop to pay all those prices, and then crappy weed. And then we've got these great craft grower. It's really, yeah, it's a bit of a mess, but I'm glad there's hope if Michigan worked it all out. So.
And is it the best state for weed in the nation there now, Rick, or what?
Well, I'd like to think so. We see 5 of those big legacy markets: California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, and Colorado, all with year-over-year declines in sales. And yet here in Michigan, we had a 16% increase in our adult use market alone just last month over month, and we're up 56% year over year. Yeah. So this is, we passed a law in 2018. First stores opened in 2019 on the adult use market. So at this point, you're talking about 3-4 years. That's the definition of a mature market, and we are still on the improve. So I'd like to say that our 10% tax is one of the lowest in the United States, and that really helps people recruit out of the unregulated market into the regulated market, because the pricing is so similar between both markets now.
And did Michigan reduce the 280E tax at all? I mean, or not? I know that's federal, but I mean, within the states, you can do some sort of. I know New York State, New Jersey, I think in Pennsylvania are working on different ways within the state to eliminate the burden of that 280E tax.
There's been no tax relief, but what we have seen is steadily declining licensing fees. As the number of licenses increase, the amount of burden is shared over a greater number of shoulders, and therefore there's
He's frozen.
2019. It was
Oh, there he is.
extremely expensive at that particular time.
You froze on us. I was freaked a little bit there.
Yeah, what, I didn't catch that, what you said the
Yeah,
last.
repeat what you said because you were in Frozen. You were in a state of frozen animation.
Yes.
Wow. Wow. That was such a popular movie. I didn't get any proceeds from that though. But we haven't received any tax relief at all. But what we have done is reduce the cost of licensure. As more and more companies come online, it's less expensive to get into and maintain your licenses in the industry. And that has provided some sort of de facto relief. But in the last 2 months, we've actually seen our price declines reversed. And we're starting to see a slow increase in our per ounce price, per gram price on cannabis flower here. And we believe that that's the result of a more aggressive regulatory framework, a more aggressive cannabis regulatory agency that seems to be going after some of those industry players that have been cheating and importing distillate from California and things like that. So once the regulatory guys get their feet underneath them and they start cracking down on the cheats, then prices tend to stabilize.
Okay, so there's a lot of cheats out there.
No. Yeah.
Okay.
Human behavior. But right
Human
now,
behavior.
right now, Pam, it says here there's 8 adult use stores for the entire state of New York. 8.
I think there's 4.
Well, again, I'm
sure you're right. We're creeping up there.
reading off a script. Okay, so I mean, I cut and pasted it. I don't know if I'm right or not. I can't even tell you where I caught it from. No, it was on one of the newsletters.
You're in the ballpark. Yeah, very little.
And of course, and the governor's taking heat because tax revenues are not what they expected. Well, of course not. It's like you can't tax the legacy market, and the adult use isn't even open yet, really.
No, and I'll tell you another thing that came out today that they're trying to cover up from their fumbling around of this slow rollout here in the state, in New York State, is they just introduced a cannabis crop rescue act. And that is because they need to bail out the farmers because they're sitting on something like 300,000 pounds of weed that they can't sell because they have so few dispensaries open. And this is what we were reporting on, a few weeks ago, of course. So they have to bail them out. How can they not? And it's their fault. They made a promise that there were going to be so many dispensaries open. They planted for the number that they were given. And now the state has to come in, and then who's that going to fall on but the taxpayers? It's just gets worse and worse.
How come we screwed this up, guys?
I've been asking where is in our state, like trying to pinpoint where's the fumble happening? Slow, not being nimble. I mean, come on.
Let me say, government resists change, okay? And just because in Michigan's case, the people put out a voter-directed initiative, or in other states that the legislature passes something, doesn't mean the sheriff's department and the state police are on board. It doesn't mean that those existing regulatory structures that are there, no matter what administration happens to hold the governor's chair, that those institutions really are welcoming the change. And I find that when you have two parts of government that are at odds with each other, it just gets messy like this. It really does.
Right. It's too right.
Hey, and I love pointing fingers at our elected officials. There was a headline that caught my attention because this is one of my biggest beefs with the people that are making the laws and voting in and debating and pointing fingers and all this. I don't know if you follow what happened in Louisiana. Okay, Louisiana's state Senate. 2 of these senators said they were misled when they approved hemp legal legislation. They didn't realize that the THC in the hemp could actually be enhanced. Guys, anybody in the industry knows that Delta 8, you get high from Delta 8. You can get high from hemp, people, okay?
First of all, that's been around for a while. I mean, the Delta 8 everybody's fighting that in all the states. It's not news.
Right, exactly.
So education, that's probably the lack of education as well. I know.
Well, here's a perfect quote. Okay, guys, and I think you guys will relate to this. This is one of the senators. I'm not going to name it. It was not the intent of the legislature to authorize a statewide flood of unregulated THC psychoactive drug marketplace. So they think they know what they're talking about when they mention THC, and then they throw the word psychoactive next to it. Now, I was reprimanded 4 years ago by a guy who knows his stuff about hemp, and he said, CBD is psychoactive. It's not intoxicating. That's the difference. THC is intoxicating.
Yes.
Right?
But remember, there's novel cannabinoids being discovered all the time, and Delta 8 really wasn't on the market until not that long ago. So
Right.
even though it's been in the news for for enough years now that any lawmaker that's considering legislation on this level should be familiar with it.
Yes.
You know, some of the tropes that we used to learn in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, food, fuel, and fiber about hemp, some of them are a little outdated now. So
Right.
it's a rapidly moving world in the cannabis industry. I think people don't appreciate that.
Yeah.
And as long as humans are involved, they're going to look for ways to cut corners. Okay. They're going to look for ways to make a buck. It's just the nature of our species. Okay. That's what can I tell you? Hey,
Well-
Pam Schmiel, you're doing a great job in New York. And may I tell you that when I mention to people that are in New York, your name, people respect you and you have quite a lot of credibility and followers. So we're happy that you're on our We Talk News team.
Thank you.
Officially and in public. I'm thanking you.
Thank you.
Now, if you think New York is a mess, we've got Doug Miller from New Jersey coming on next. And New Jersey has had quite a week with our pals here in Massachusetts with Curaleaf. We'll get into
Oh,
that
yeah.
after this. Don't go away. More of Green Rush really live today after this.
Hi, everyone. I'm Karen Black with Greenfinger Consulting. Welcome to the Arizona Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs signed House Bill 2446 into law on April 11th. The bill expands the list of entities eligible for disbursements from Arizona's Smart and Safe Fund, which is comprised largely of marijuana-related taxes, fees, and fines. Among those who will benefit from the measure are the police and firefighting agencies of Indian reservations, police departments of certain universities, and the Arizona Department of Public Safety. Contentious Arizona Senate Bill 1271, which in part governs the sale of Delta 8 products, died in the House last month. However, parties on either side continue to clash. The Hemp Industry Trade Association of Arizona wrote the legislation in direct collaboration with the Department of Agriculture. The Arizona Dispensaries Association recently joined forces with Arizona's poison centers to oppose the measure, claiming it allows products with extreme concentrations of synthetic THC to be sold anywhere, including to minors, with little to no regulation. Since there will be no further legislative action this year, consumer protections for Arizonans remain on hold. Marvina Thomas of 420 Collections made history as Arizona's first Black female dispensary owner with the acquisition of a vertically integrated medical license. Her new dispensary in Stafford, Arizona opened on 420. This new endeavor, coupled with her existing New Mexico operations, makes Ms. Thomas one of the first women of color to become a multi-state operator. The Marijuana Industry Trade Association will host its monthly networking event April 26th in Scottsdale. For more information, visit MITA.org. That's MITA.org. That'll do it for this week's Arizona Cannabis Report. This is Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting, reporting for Weed Talk News.
And welcome back to a really live edition of Green Rush, the Business of Cannabis talk show. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, and I officially want to welcome Karen Black to the Weed Talk News team. That's who just had that report from Arizona, and we're so happy to be expanding our coverage into Arizona. And by the way, if anybody's watching from Colorado or California, you should be ashamed of yourselves. I have tried so many times to get somebody to help us with a California report or Colorado report, and maybe once, maybe twice we've seen it, and then they just don't do it anymore. So if you happen to know anyone in those states that might be interested in actually filing a 90-second news report about what's going on in their state, please contact me at Jimmy@Pro Cannabis Media. Welcome, Doug Miller from New Jersey today. Hi, Doug. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you guys today?
Good enough. So we had all sorts of stuff about New Jersey. First of all, you guys continue to sell a lot of weed down there, even though you don't have a lot to sell, right?
That is the truth. New Jersey, kind of did it right, but accidentally. They had such limited licenses for dispensaries. So we have a few, and they're more opening up, but in the beginning it was just so limited. And I think that's part of the problem in some of the states that just get so saturated. There's just too much competition. I mean, you can go on, any corner, and a block away there's 3 dispensaries. How do they compete? And especially as you get into times like this, and people are going to be very picky as to what they want, brands, and what they spend their money on. And dispensaries aren't going to be able to thrive like they were in the pandemic, when the government was just handing checks out to everybody and people were just throwing money every which way. It's going to be a
buying
different
weed
world.
with it, and buying weed with it. And if this particular cut and paste job that I did with the news, it's actually 1 year today that New Jersey opened for adult use, correct?
That is correct. Yeah, it was the day
Well,
after.
happy birthday.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Now you got an ounce there for $455 in New Jersey. Is that accurate?
What's that?
An
An
ounce
ounce,
goes
yeah.
for $454, right? And in Massachusetts, I was getting emails from different dispensaries, $90 for an ounce.
It's a big difference. I mean, we did have every dispensary had their specials yesterday for 420, and even a couple days leading up, but still, I mean, the prices are just absurd. I mean, like the specials are like, if you spend $300, you get like a $20 pack of gummies or like lozenges. We're not even allowed to really have edibles, so they're all these lozenges, and they're just horrible. I mean, they're garbage. So our edible market is just not even available, I don't think. And it's just crazy.
So can your legislature can change the rules though? Because I know there's already some talk about actually getting home grow, right? In New Jersey, they're talking about it anyway. We don't know how
mentioned it.
Right. And but I'm kind of hoping that after a year they'll look back and say, okay, what can we do to improve or help or whatever? But now let's talk about the saga of one of the largest MSOs, the company that is based in Massachusetts, where we do our webcast out of here and originate. Curaleaf, they got shut down, and then something happened that allowed them to open up again. You want to walk us through the saga of Curaleaf in New Jersey over the last week or two?
Sure, it was magical. So about the 14th of April, the CRC decides that they're just going to pull the license. They're not going to renew it. And as of 4/21 today, they weren't supposed to be able to sell adult use cannabis. And it was 2 of the locations, and they have 3 locations in New Jersey, and one was still allowed to operate. And then all of a sudden, politics started to get thrown around, I think, a lot. And
Come on,
magically,
Doug.
Politics?
Politics?
Follow the money trail is what I always say. Follow that money trail.
And we may not know, we may not be able to see where that trail is because we think something had to happen, right?
Well, for them to just all to go in Monday morning and be like, hey, you know what? We're going to reverse what we said, and they're going to be renewed their licenses, and everything is just perfectly fine. And now they have until June to show us that they're in good faith.
Right.
And it's like, wow, that was pretty impressive. Like, how'd that happen? And apparently Curaleaf was going to sue the state. But again, the politicians got involved because, I mean, there's just way too money involved in all the lobbyists and that, fund their political events and this and that. So it's how it worked.
Yeah. Hey, Rick, have you been on with Doug before?
Oh, for sure. Yes, a couple
Yeah,
times.
that's what I thought. That's what I thought. I wanted to make sure. Um, let's talk about Atlantic City. Okay. Um, I get it. It's not Las Vegas. It wants to be, but it's not Las Vegas. Can cannabis and social consumption lounges actually put like a little boost to the economy in Atlantic City? Is that not an opportunity for that city?
So yeah, absolutely. Atlantic City's definitely struggling, and especially Philadelphia opened up gambling. So a lot of people that would drive to AC came from the Philadelphia area. And right before you get to the bridge to cross over into New Jersey, so you don't have to pay $5, there's like 4 casinos. So
Mm.
it's a no-brainer. And they
Right.
do very, very well. And now you have a whole town in AC, Atlantic City, that's built around casinos, and they're terrible. And it's sad. It's a really sad. I mean, you have a beautiful area. It could be beautiful. It's not very nice, but it could be built up. And yeah, the cannabis industry would definitely make it thrive. And they're actually the first town. And I was saying this before. They need consumption lounges, but they're falling behind. I say the time is so valuable. They needed to get in there 3 months ago and start passing this. So as of yesterday, the first medical dispensary was allowed to sell recreational. It's called MPXNJ, and so now that dispensary, yeah, it's a smaller MSO, but they're allowed now to sell adult use cannabis now in Atlantic City. So it took that long. So our state's been recreational for almost a year, and they only had medical dispensaries. Yeah, today, and
Right.
and so and they also the council is just killing them because they also passed an ordinance where they prohibited any of the dispensaries that are along the boardwalk can't be adult use. So there's one that operates over there. It's what's the
You'll come.
botanist. That's it, the botanist.
I know
And
the botanist.
that's the name of the dispensary, and they have a couple locations in New Jersey, and it's a decent dispensary actually. And they're only going to be able to do medical. They're not going to be able to survive in Atlantic City on that boardwalk because you have to have a medical card to go purchase. And when they have these big events down in Atlantic City this summer, and now that there's recreational dispensaries, people aren't going to go to that adult use. I mean, they were getting people in there because it was your only option down there, and there was ways to get in. But who's going to go there now? So they're pretty much screwed.
Yeah, you got the state has 17 operating cultivators who grow, 11 of which grow adult use. I don't like recreational, adult use, according to your CRC. And let's see, what other facts did I hear? But what state is going to get it right? This is the thing. Now that we've had, I think by tomorrow, Delaware, although
Delaware.
we broke that story thanks to Rick Thompson, or at least we attributed it to the what was it, the Delaware Online Service?
Delaware Online, yes, right.
You subscribe. By the way, you subscribe to the Delaware Online News Service. Is that really true, Rick?
Of course not, Jimmy. Morgan started to talk about it, and so did you. So I just Googled that thing.
There you go. Thank you very much for that. That's why I like to do live news, because we have immediate reaction to stuff that comes across. It used to be called The Wire when I was back in the day in the newsrooms, where I used to have to rip the wire. AP and UPI were the two wire services. Now there's no such thing. It's just Google this, Google that. So it is what it is. Doug, where would you like to see the biggest growth, the biggest change in New Jersey to perhaps make it a more viable, robust cannabis economy?
Well, we're introducing consumption lounge actually in Atlantic City. One of the casinos is going to have a big consumption lounge in a place called the High Rollers Lounge or something. It's going to be a dispensary, and so I think the consumption lounges will definitely help our industry. I think they're a must, to be honest with you. It's just like bars. I mean, you have liquor stores and then you have bars, and look how profitable bars are. Of course, they serve food, but they make their money on the liquor. And
they're going to sell food. Hey, hang on a second. They're going to sell food at these cannabis lounges because one of the impact, one of the effects of weed is you get hungry, you get the munchies. I mean, it happens, right?
Well, that's what I was going to say. So they can't sell cannabis there, but they'll obviously have food options. So they'll make money there, but you'll have a lot of traffic coming in because people just want a place that you can go hang out and be able to relax. Like the Summit Lounge is a really cool place. It's a small spot. You can cruise in, smoke, feel comfortable, and do your thing and leave, and not you're not breaking any laws. You don't have to look around and feel uncomfortable about it. And I think that's an important part of the whole industry, is just feeling more comfortable and people feeling safe to use it, even though it is obviously legal or adult use. And but again, it's just like that whole stigma of it, and you just
Yep.
like walk around and you just kind of feel. And obviously I'm not saying you should be using it around children or kids or anything, but I mean you should just be comfortable being able to go somewheres and consume.
But
And
it offers adults a great opportunity to talk to their young children about adult products and adult activities. Okay, because at some point the parent has to talk to the child about alcohol. He has to talk to the child about sex. And now you can add cannabis to the list. Okay. So once again, whoa, what about the kids? No, the parents have an obligation to learn about these products more than perhaps what they know now, because we all grew up with alcohol as an acceptant in our society, in our world, and we all learned how to consume it responsibly, and we understand what the effects are if you don't consume it responsibly and you're irresponsible. Right, guys? I think we've all been there at some point in our lives, whether we were teenagers, in our 20s, or perhaps even still happening now in our 40s, 50s, and 60s. Anyway, Doug, can you stick around? Because I bet we have Brandon Jones in the waiting room from Missouri. And I think we can bring in Brandon, and the four of us can probably talk to him a little bit about what's going on in Missouri. Because if there is one state that might actually be getting it right, it might be the show me state of Missouri. And Brandon Jones joins us now. Hi, Brandon.
Hey, Jimmy. How are you, sir?
Good. Say hi to Doug and Rick.
Hey, Doug. Hey, Rick.
So
how's it going, Brandon?
These are 3 We Talk News dedicated correspondents for our weekly news show that Elena Pinto anchors. And again, I always thank you publicly for your dedication and your work, Brandon. And I love your attitude. And you did a great job last week with some of those interviews, too.
I appreciate it, man. It's been a crazy ride, and I appreciate you letting me jump on the train and be a part of it. It's been quite a little journey for the last year and a half to see where we started and where we are now. It's pretty awesome. I like I said, appreciate the opportunity, and I think I'm maybe beginning a little bit better with all the practice we're getting, so I appreciate it.
You definitely are, but we're going to work on 16.9 and 9.16 with your phone and everything too, but let's not worry about that. I want to know what you did on 420 and what were some of the other activities in Missouri for 420.
So I was at 420 Fest at the Smoky River Entertainment District, which was its first ever event held at the space. Had over 9,000 attendees for the Wiz Khalifa concert that was attached to it. I think I saw about 9,000 people smoking cannabis at the exact same time in the exact same place for the first time in my adult life, especially in Missouri. So it was a crazy event. Mike Tyson, Ric Flair showed up. The Dab Stars themselves, Jonah and Nick Woodward, were there as well too. I couldn't even name how many awesome people were there, but it was amazing to see this happening in Kansas City, and just the change that's happening here in the Midwest, and especially where I grew up. It's crazy.
And you were it was an outdoor consumption event.
Correct. It was an outdoor area where it was designated areas. There was a cannabis village where it was a consumption village to the right. The stage was to the left. There was food trucks and alcohol in a different location that you could purchase, but you couldn't purchase alcohol in the same place you could purchase cannabis, and you were technically not to consume in the same place. But yes, there was a fenced off area. This is where cannabis is going to be consumed, but it's decriminalized in the city of Kansas City, so they didn't technically enforce if you used cannabis outside the designated area.
Right. There goes my Harley Davidson riding neighbor. Anyway, I don't even know if people can hear him as he goes by, but my walls shake every time he drives his motorcycle. Brandon, walk us through what it's like a day in the life for you. Tell people what you do and how you fill up your day and wave the cannabis flag in your backyard, if you will.
Oh man, so I guess first of all, it starts with this: if there is an event, then I'm trying 9 times out of 10 to support the community in any way, whether it's a small little mom and pop, throwing an event, or Wiz Khalifa. So I try to support the community, and with those things, I just go out, say hello, give some free boost packs away, and just try to engage with the community, answer questions, educate, and just be an advocate for the plant. Then obviously I have to make a living. So the biggest thing that I do to earn a living is sell these Integra Boost humidity packs. For those that aren't familiar, it basically makes a humidor or a humidity controlled environment out of anything that you can seal. So your cannabis doesn't either dry out or mold.
Mm-hmm.
So I spend a lot of time, trying to get those products into the right hands. They're used by, the growers at the, the actual farms, all the way down to final manufacturing, the grow shops and everything in between.
Yeah. What's an ounce go for? What's an ounce go for in Missouri right now?
Well, it kind of wavers. I mean, you can get an eighth for as low as $20, and you can get an eighth as high as $60. And then there's not really much breaks, but yeah, there's a $40 difference basically. There's some outdoor stuff from Flora Farms that's still pretty decent flower that you can get for $20, or you can buy an indoor special strain from Illicit that's still $60 an eighth for some of their strains.
So that's about, I'm going to guess that's 240, 220 an ounce, maybe 200, right?
Yeah. You can get it 160 is about the cheapest down. If you're getting $20 for 8 eighths in an ounce, so you 8 times 20 or 160. But if you're spending $60 an ounce on 8 of those, you're $480 an ounce.
Yeah. Hey, Doug, what's an ounce sell for in New Jersey?
That's where we're at. We're right around there. So
455, right? 455.
That's crazy.
Rick, I don't even know where to go, because this is a great opportunity when you look at the different states, and everybody has different pricing and everybody has different issues that they have to deal with at the state level. Is anybody listening? That's what I guess what the question is. Is anybody out there in anybody's state saying, well, you know what, maybe we should do it like X state is doing it, or look what X state is doing with theirs, and look at the tax revenue that they're getting. Are they just basically it's a necessary evil weed in our legal states?
Well, here's what I can tell you. When citizens craft voter-directed initiatives, they sure pay attention to what's going on, what's successful in other states. When legislatures take up the issue of cannabis law reform, oftentimes they don't look at other states as good examples. I think there's a kind of a chutzpah that goes on inside their heads that says, we can do it differently, we can do it better. Our state is so unique. By the way, in Michigan, according to the Cannabis Regulatory Agency, $89 a zip for us here, 89. And the last 2 months, we've actually seen the price trickle back up because it was doing a free fall. But there are so many factors that factor into this too. If it's a limited license market, then there will be an artificial structure there to keep the pricing structure a little bit higher. If it's an unlimited license market like we have here in Michigan, then you are going to have extreme competition and extreme overproduction, and you will have a race to the bottom, both in price and unfortunately in quality too. So I think on a federal level, though, when we see people on a federal level trying to craft laws, Morgan Fox was on earlier today. I think they are paying attention to the success stories in different states, and they would like to cobble together something that takes the best of all of the different programs out of it. But boy, I don't have a whole lot of hope for anybody whose legislature wants to come up with a law for cannabis law reform. They just don't seem to pay attention to anything outside their borders.
And there's all sorts of reports of doom and gloom, and yet you hear what's going on in Missouri. New Jersey's trying, at least, Doug. Okay, but and New York is just. I tell people this all the time. You could focus the next 5 to 10 years your business on New York State, and you would do just fine because that market is not going to disappear, and it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And you know, I'm thrilled that we're able to document it like we do.
Yeah, I would just say one thing, Jimmy. The pricing that's been, that's changing a little bit here is because, the supply and demand has gone crazy. We have done, $230 million in sales in 2 months. There's no way that anybody saw that on supply chain growing. So that's the biggest thing that was pricing is going a little bit is just there is a limited number of licenses. They projected what they thought sales would be. The state opened the sales 3 days early, so an entire weekend. And that weekend they did 13 million in sales in one weekend. And so like all those numbers, just they weren't ready for that big of a surplus on people purchasing. So that's the biggest thing now is everybody's playing catch up to now get in. And the biggest thing you see now with the quality of the flower is it doesn't get to cure as long because they want it to market to sell because people are buying it because there's no other flower to buy.
Well,
So
that's similar to what happened in New Jersey. I mean, our state started last year. It was boom. I mean, honestly, you couldn't even, I live real close to the Curaleaf. I couldn't even leave my house because the traffic's just so insane. I have a picture from yesterday if you want to show it. I mean, there was more cops sitting out front of Curaleaf just trying to direct the traffic. There you go. There was nobody in line. Usually that line is wrapped past that house everywhere. There's 3 cops standing out there. There was nobody there. That was at 12:50 in the afternoon when it's usually a line down the street. And I know the one dispensary close by, Cannabis, they had a pretty good line, but again, Curaleaf's just going through one of them tough times where they're there's a lot of talk and things happen. And they did have a nice line the day or two previous to 420, but it wasn't like it's always been.
No, they're not going to get a lot of sympathy, Curaleaf, let's just say. Hey, Brandon, do you still have lines in Missouri?
Oh yeah, well, especially yesterday, and I drove by dispensary picking up my son. Obviously, I didn't keep my son at the concert last night, so my parents watched him. So I drove to Kansas, which is always not fun. So I have 2 cars, but on the way back, going through Kansas City, going through Missouri, I saw the lines at the dispensaries. But yeah, you have to, if you have a roach in Kansas, it's 30 days minimum sentence. And my parents live 25 minutes from my house, but it's in Kansas.
What you explained, I'll never forget that day where you explained, yeah, one side of the street is Missouri and the other side is Kansas, right?
State Line Road is a road that runs through the middle of Kansas City, and either side of the street you're either in Missouri or in Kansas. You can sports gamble in Kansas. You can't sports gamble in Missouri. You can purchase cannabis in Missouri, but you can't in Kansas. The city of Kansas City itself, thank goodness, by Mayor Lucas was decriminalized. So if you're inside the actual city limits of Kansas City, then you're not in trouble. But if you're in Overland Park on State Line, or you're just outside of the city limits of Kansas City itself, and there's some areas that you don't really know when you're out of actual Kansas City and in a suburb, then yeah, you're 100% going 30-day minimum sentence, getting bonded out of jail to get out.
And the law enforcement is still enforcing these laws. They're still prosecuting these laws in Kansas.
3 weeks ago, a 65-year-old woman friend of mine went to the grocery store, and she turned right and didn't go. Went to Kansas. Thought I should have thought about it later. Should have turned left. She had a roach underneath her coffee cup, this big. They arrested her and took her to jail. She had to get bonded out.
Oh my God.
And again, this is why at least there is the Supreme Court, the President of the United States. They get it that there is a bad, one state has it legal, the other state doesn't. They know that, and then you get the federal situation where you can't, write off your regular business expenses. Things happen.
I don't know the number correctly right now, but I know there's been over 7,000 expungements already in the state of Missouri as well. So it's so weird seeing on one side, people are actually getting expunged and people are still getting arrested in Kansas. It's just like, what is going on?
Now, it's one of the reasons why we have to have these kinds of shows to expose and talk about what goes on in each individual state, because there's no consistency, and the governance is being done by people that don't understand what THC does to you and what CBD does to you. The fact, one of the things that I'm going to take a shot at my old friends in the media, who, by the way, they're out of my book of life. Let's just say. That being said, CBD is a psychoactive cannabinoid. It works and interacts with the endocannabinoid system, which handles your neurotransmitters in your brain, people. Okay. It just doesn't get you high or intoxicated. That's what THC does. But I can't tell you, every time I read a newspaper, or newsletter, whatever, story, and they're writers writing about CBD and THC now in new states, they're constantly screwing this up. And then, of course, people don't understand that you can get high from Delta 8. These are the Kentucky people and the Louisiana people who just didn't understand what was going on with hemp in the beginning. And now it's we've really opened up the wild green rush in our country, guys. And I don't know what's going to happen. I do know this. Doug, you've been here half an hour. We thank you. Brandon, if you want to hang out for another 15 minutes with us, we know that Andrew Berenger from the DC, Maryland, Virginia area is going to come on. I just don't remember if it's at 5:30 or at 5:45. So we're going to take a break. But on the way to this break, I'm pretty sure this is where we're going to show. I happened to be at a hotel last night, the Moxie Hotel in Times Square on 7th Ave. And thank you, Rick Granoff, by the way, of Smoking Interiors. And what do you think was going on? They had pop-ups in the bar area. Pop-ups are where people have these little crafts or brands that they want to sell. And a lot of it was CBD based. So we're going to introduce you to the girls of the pop-ups down in New York, and then we'll come back and get going with our final half hour of Green Rush Live. Don't go away.
Hi, I'm Meryl from Burner Babe. These are our king size papers as well as our 1 1/4 papers. We have them printed with all kinds of little patterns. We've got little hearts, little grapefruits, flowers. All of them are printed with vegan inks, and they're all printed on rice paper. And then we've got our melamine trays, which have super cute little patterns on them. For people who don't know how to roll, we roll these in Brooklyn. These are our pre-rolled cones. They come in all of our patterns.
Is it burnerbabe.com?
It's burnerbabe.co.
.co.
Yes.
Oh, you're too cool to have a com.
I think burnerbabe.com is for people who go to Burning Man. And then we've got our colorful filters. They're all made from recycled paper. And we've got all kinds of colors, and then some stars, some flowers, and some ones with little hearts.
Stars. Oh.
And then lastly, we've got our tamping stick / joint holders. So you can use the tip of the joint holder to tamp down your cones, and then you can stick the joint through the little holes in the flowers and moons.
Hi, my name is Rose. I'm a representative for Kush Cards right now, and I'm just going to walk you through my booth right now at the Moxie Hotel. Right now we have our one-hitter cards. So we have Father's Day cards, Mother's Day cards, birthday cards, general, pick-me-up cards. Yeah. We also sell gift sets and bags and wrapping paper and such. Now these are my favorite. We have cones, super cute, super fun for 420. We have other cards as well. These cute little stickers. And yeah, here's our Instagram and social media.
I'm Angie, and I'm here with Oho. So let me walk you through a lot of the products that we have. So Oho is a CBD and wellness company. So we have like our recovery balm, which is really good for any type of skin irritation and pain management. It's antibacterial and anti-inflammatory. We also have our body oil, which is about 1,600 milligrams of CBD, which is really high compared to most companies. And then we have our tinctures that are really good for sleep, anxiety, or if you need to focus, just depending on what you really need it for. And then now I'll take you to our doggy treats, which are really good. They're peanut butter flavor. They have about 5 milligrams of CBD, really good for as well bones, any pain, inflammation. And then now we have our gummies, which do the same thing, take the edge off during the day, help you focus. Our chocolates for the day and the night. And then we also have our hand creams. And this is what the packaging, of course, looks like. So you have like bergamot, neroli, and CBD as well.
I'm Gina Surfless from 024, and we are fragrance for your high maintenance. We've designed candles with patented scent technology that targets and neutralizes the cannabis smell. They come in 3 beautiful fragrances: forbidden fruit, cannatonic, and incense and pepper. Together, but I work with the perfumers to design the fragrances, and then we add the patented scent technology that goes into each fragrance to target and neutralize the cannabis smell.
And welcome back to the final half hour of Green Rush Live, our really live business of cannabis talk show that we do every Friday afternoon from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. We usually follow up at 6 p.m. with our weekly Weed Talk news, but because 420 fell on a Thursday, which is really the day where we compile all the stories, I just invited all the correspondents onto the show. And they're with us now. In fact, one of our newest contributors is Andrew Berenger out of the Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia area. Andrew, thank you so much. And Brandon, yes, thank you for introducing me to Andrew, okay? You happy now? All right.
Yes.
And thanks for having me.
You bet. Those areas are always changing, every day there's another story about the Virginia governor, and then you've got Maryland opening up with adult use. And can you give us kind of an overview of what's going on in those various states? And now we broke this story that let's credit where credit is due. This would be the Delaware online service reporting that the governor will allow those laws to pass without his signature. So
he said he's not going to be signing the bill, pretty much.
Correct.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, I figured that's exactly what he was going to do.
A typical cop out of a governor or whatever, I didn't make it legal, I couldn't, whatever. But
I feel like it's mainly because, he said no already one time, to then turn around and say yes the next year, for him, maybe potentially political, career suicide, as they say. And because no politician wants to be a flip-flopper, as they say.
Oh,
God forbid it helps people.
That's right. God forbid it, you representing people that put you in that seat. Isn't that how a republic and a democracy is supposed to work? So let me ask you a question, because we talked about this in the break. So we have people making new laws through the ballot initiative, and Florida right now is going through a big adult use ballot initiative. And then we have places like Vermont, I'm pretty sure was the first state to do it through their legislature. And I'm talking about adult use legalization. What is the best way, Andrew, in your estimation and opinion of what is the best way to implement consistent state by state law?
Oh, I feel like that's a loaded question, and I'm going to try and break that down as best as I can.
Please do.
Let's just say there is no right or correct one answer for that right now, especially with this industry. There are certain states that need to do it through the ballot initiative. And then there's certain states that shouldn't. And, for one instance, Maryland, the only reason it went through a ballot initiative in the first place is because their legislative branches were in so nice ways to put it, purchased off by lobbyists, by the medical cannabis community here in Maryland to elongate the medical program as long as possible. And then that's why they made it a ballot referendum. Places like, I don't know if anyone saw what happened in Oklahoma recently.
Yes.
States like Oklahoma definitely should have probably gone through the legislative process, because then it most likely would have passed instead of a 20-point difference of saying no to cannabis with one of the largest footprinted cannabis industries in the country out of any other state. So it definitely depends on the atmosphere, I'd say, of the state itself, and what the people really want. Maryland did a great job of, I feel like I may be a little biased. Maryland did a good job of ballot initiative, and then the following legislative calendar, giving a date of start date, and then a council, and then they've worked together. And it was a long time coming, though. So it's a loaded question, I will have to say. There is no one answer.
Right. That's why it's a talk show and why I'm a talk show host. Okay. I always have these
great questions. I love onion questions, layers.
Hey, Brandon and Andrew, since Brandon, you're the one who introduced me and you brought that up, and I want to give you credit. Okay. How did you guys meet? How do you know each other?
It's a good question. Go ahead, Brandon.
Well, I mean, we know through Clubhouse is the first fun way. And then we met in Vegas one time, but the Clubhouse is where we had a lot of fun talking, discussing. It's just in a way where we could podcast and be able to speak and talk about different, aspects of cannabis. And it's a fun where interaction was, allowed by anyone that was in the room. So we just got a lot of time talking and being able to just learn from each other, and being in rooms where I got to listen to Andrew talk about policy. And I was like, holy cow, this guy knows his stuff. Whenever he's in a room, I'm selecting to go follow him and listen, because I'm learning something every single time. And I think Andrew just thought I was a funny guy that I listened to him and was always loved to learn.
You do. And you're also from Missouri. So, an advocate like yourself down there is needed in many other states, to help this industry out.
Right.
And being a part of NORML, Andrew, is a big part of that, and tried to hook me up with those people here. So KC NORML, as well as Missouri NORML and Kansas NORML, I'm all a part of trying to get, laws passed and changed. My story is from the car wreck. I have a really bad car wreck. I was put on, 150 stitches in my face, morphine, drip, all that stuff. So cannabis saved my life and got me off of opioids. So I am a huge advocate of speaking over plant over pill medicine whenever I can. And I think that's the real message behind why Andrew and I connected, is because he could tell I was coming to be an advocate for the plant whenever possible.
Rick, how many times have you heard stories like that?
I never get tired of it either. For a long time, we paraded moms with sick kids in front of the legislature and couldn't get what we wanted from them. We would parade veterans with had injuries and PTSD, and we couldn't get what we wanted from them. And then they saw Colorado starting to make mad bucks, and all of a sudden everybody wanted to line up at the trough. Yep. So I never get tired of hearing people's stories of healing, because that's the biggest way that you make an impact with the regular citizenry. Regular citizenry doesn't care about the money. They care about the healing.
I couldn't agree more. Myself, I have epilepsy. I've had it since I was 8 years old. I am on a lot of medicine, and cannabis saves my life. Not, unfortunately, I wish it was just cannabis, but cannabis helps me function like a human being, like a normal human being. It allows me to eat, sleep. It allows me to interact on every hour of every day. It saves my life. And then in turn, I found out that I enjoy politics for some reason, and cannabis. And so I try to be a voice for others that can't, for the best of the people, for the best of the reasons.
That's fantastic. I love hearing these stories, and I love when we're able to bring this out into the public too, because one of the biggest frustrations I have with our traditional media people, companies, and I'm throwing them all under the bus at this point, is not allowing public service announcements. Now, you guys, have you seen the Last Prisoner Project PSAs that they put out, Rick, more than anybody? And Did you see
Yeah,
him?
and
Yes.
they were here in Kansas City speaking at the event. Dante West was actually there and spoke. He was, one of the members and founders, one of the people that was actually released by them, and is a big supporter of the project. So Dante and his group were there. So
I was in Washington D.C. yesterday for 420, and there were a few LPP. There's a lot of acronyms there for there was a cannabis summit held at the U.S. Capitol.
Right. And there's on 420, I know there is. What you don't know is a piece of history of pro cannabis media that Steve D'Angelo, who's really the founder of the Last Prisoner Project, in October of 2019, and yes, you can look it up. He announced the Last Prisoner Project on one of our live shows. We had Weed Talk with Kurt Dalton at the time, and it was a once a month 2-hour show. And then the pandemic came along and I was an idiot and I started doing 3 2-hour shows every other day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And needless to say that by December 20th, I was toast. I was toast. But we got
Pardon the pun.
Right. You know what, though? We interviewed hundreds of people. I've learned so much about this industry. I'm so fascinated by all the different little things. And, basic economics, supply and demand. You can look at how many different states right now that have issues with supply and demand. Massachusetts is one. New Jersey is certainly one. New York is another one.
Missouri is one.
Especially if you include the topic of adult use and then medical,
right.
And then who gets priority. I mean, obviously it should always be medical having a priority, but access to it, supply at the same time, and then sales. I mean, I don't know if anyone saw Michigan sales last month. $250 million in 1 month in sales, and
Rick Thompson was responsible for half of that.
239 came from adult use, and only 11 million came from medical.
And that's going to lead us into our next discussion, and it's the word recreational. Okay, it is definitely worth talking about this because I don't like that word, because I don't think you should be using a plant medicine recreationally. I just don't. It's like saying I use Robitussin recreationally, because you get really, really high from Robitussin. If you've ever had a cough or bronchitis, and then they throw codeine in it, right? So I guess the question I'm going to ask Rick Thompson first, because I really do have a lot of respect for all of you guys on this call. But Rick, I want to ask you, the word recreational, does it hurt the cause?
Well, first of all, I'm waiting for a new cannabis strain called Robitussin now that I've learned that it can really fuck you up. So I know that's going to happen.
Don't mix, Rick. Don't mix.
Thanks for the advice, Pops. So the reality of it is.
Wait, did you just call me Pops?
I did. Yes. It's just fun. We're having a good time today. It's 421. We're playing with rules.
Man, does the mute button work? No, I'm only kidding.
Brandon's laughing, so I got a good one.
That's right. No, it's all right. I'll take it. Look, I'm 65, people. Deal with it. I'm a senior citizen, and I love the discounts I get. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry.
The reality is, though, is that we have a lot of people in all of our states who are still have not come to Jesus yet on the issue of cannabis. So when we talk about it, how we discuss it, how we phrase it, what we want to put forth first, is medical an important thing for this person to learn about? Should we talk about adult use with this person? What is their motivation? How you speak to people matters. And I think using recreational, it has an implication in the people that are not familiar with cannabis, that maybe those of us who use cannabis on a daily don't normally associate it with. But people who are not already there, they need to hear adult use instead of rec. They do.
Andrew, what's your feeling about recreational, the word, and does it hurt the cause?
So, Rick, great answer. My thing is, does it hurt the cause? Absolutely. And I'll give it a different angle to look at. When you say recreational, and first of all, and I agree with you, Jimmy, is that, even if you're using cannabis for adult use purposes for fun, you're going to get medical benefit from it no matter what. Everybody does. But recreational includes children. I do, because I do talk to a lot of legislators, and I have to make sure my words are encompassing of what you really want. And since only adults will be using cannabis in that market, you want to make sure to say adult use because recreational includes children.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure we don't want that unless it's for medical reasons, people with epilepsy, etc.
Right.
So that's my reasoning behind it.
Yep. And Brandon, what's your feeling about the word recreational?
No, I appreciate you letting me go last because I'm just going to copycat off of those two. They are brilliant answers. So yeah, I mean, I think just that adult use is what needs to be said. We don't want it being in any way mixed with children unless it is, like Andrew said, a medical reason. Seizures obviously is a big cause that they're seeing drastic changes and awesome results from cannabis in children having seizures. So, but I don't think that's how we should label it. It should be labeled as adult use.
Right. Exactly.
Just like it should be labeled cannabis. Sorry.
Right.
You know, to not marijuana, cannabis.
Right. Oh, no. Agree 100%. And by the way, do we use alcohol recreationally?
Yes.
Do we use alcohol medicinally? Yes. Red wine.
Alcohol
Red
is the
wine.
only drug you can die from withdrawal from, by the way.
Which one?
Alcohol.
Oh, that's a good point. That is a good point. That's a good lobbyist point, isn't it, Andrew? That's a good one.
I
like
may have
that.
used it once or twice before. I'm just saying.
I like that.
A lobby, and by the way, the alcohol industry spent last year $159 million just on lobbying efforts in general across the country.
So here's the question for my, I don't want to call you my favorite lobbyist, but now, since you're on this show right now, you're my favorite lobbyist. Okay?
I'll take it. All
right.
right.
Which of the big groups do you think eventually will be the dictating group, if you will? Will it be big tobacco, big pharma, or big alcohol that's going to be the one that really gets into the cannabis space and starts acquiring companies?
Okay, so thank you for letting me go first on this, and I'd love to get Rick and Brandon's input on this. I'm pretty sure Brandon's heard me spew information about the organization that I'm about to say. It's called CPAIR. It's called the Cannabis Coalition of Education and Regulation. It's a really fancy name. Makes you sound all like important. And then what they're saying and stating is that they deserve to build out the regulation and infrastructure for the cannabis industry because of their members' time-tested industries. And I will state the largest contributors to this organization, Altria, Coors Molson, what's the other tobacco company? And
RJ Reynolds?
it was like something.
Morris?
Say it again.
Philip Morris.
I feel like Philip Morris might be it, but it's a different one. I'll look it up. But and then there's Constellation Brand. So there's two of the biggest tobacco and then two of the biggest alcohol. And so you're saying, well, which one are we going to have to worry about? This is the worst possible situation because they're working together now. They're coming to a roundtable, alcohol and tobacco, and they've been planning, in my personal opinion, you can, look at it, but, last 20, 30 years, they've been planning to take over the cannabis industry. Philip Morris, like Rick said, by 2030 was said that they will not be selling tobacco products. What do you think that they'll be selling? It's because the industry has shifted away from tobacco products to cannabis. That's the new future. And they've been planning to strategically take it over. So my answer is both and all of them, because now they're working together. That means their lobbying efforts are working together. And the worst part is they're saying, we deserve the right to build out the regulations and standards for this industry because we've done it before. No one's done cannabis before. And that's the problem, is that it's never been done before. So why does your industry deserve to have the right to do it, especially if you did it wrong in your industry? Because as we know, the cannabis industry, there's never been anything like it before. So.
Interesting. Rick, go ahead. What do you think? Which are the biggies? That's a great answer, Andrew.
Well, if you look at Big Pharma, you'll see that they tried very hard to slow this industry down unsuccessfully. And they'd like to do everything in a scientific method, which is a time-consuming way. And I think their program is going to be too long for them to be successful. I was just going to say the alcohol industry itself, if you look at how widely distributed alcohol is on a national and an international level, and look at how alcohol companies are dabbling in it. And then look at the Canadian model, where we have fully federal legalization in Canada, and the alcohol industry is incredibly ingrained in it. But now I'm a little worried that it's both the alcohol and the tobacco industry. I was unaware of this new danger, and now I have something to freak out with over the weekend. Thanks a lot, man.
I'm
Jesus.
happy I could help. I actually, when I found out about CPAIR, I was like, oh, federal legalization's 5 years, 6 years away. And then I found out, I was like, shit. Sorry about the language. I'm like, we're like 2.5 years, 3 years. Cause they're like, yeah, we can do it. But we're working together now to take over the industry, which means the advocates and the people like us who really care and want the best of the industry, we have to work like a million times harder. Like, and this is hopefully a next point is like working together. Has anyone else had a problem with working together with people in this cannabis industry? Because it can be a little tricky sometimes, I've heard and seen.
There's various levels of professionalism, isn't there? Yes.
I like that. That's a good answer, Rick.
Not everybody's at the same
Brandon,
level.
you get to chime in on this, the big pharma, big tobacco, big alcohol.
Yeah, no, obviously my biggest source of information for this topic is Andrew. Yeah. So everything that he says is all of my information. I get it directly from and when I heard about this particular group, and then we started diving in together and we started looking at who the companies were, yeah, that's when the freak out started happening. And yeah, so when you see both of them working together, it's scary. And like Andrew's saying, they're bringing no one from our industry together. How is there no one from the cannabis industry speaking about how this should be done? They, like he said, they've done it incorrectly. They don't know our industry. And how are they going to just come in and say that they have the right to do it? Well, it's because they have a lot of money and that's what they think they can do. So
I don't want more regulation and I don't want more things, but I just wonder if somehow before you go into a dispensary, you have to show that you have some knowledge of the product and you've done some research on it, some reading, something like that. Look, being a parent is by far the toughest job any of us ever have to do. We all get it. If you've been there, we've all done it. We've been up at 2 a.m. with that walking around when the kid doesn't sleep. I mean, and then they get into the adolescent world and, forget about it, right? Because like timeouts don't work. Okay. It just doesn't work. You can come up with consequences. I get it. We're going to take your phone away. We're going to take your laptop away. But you need to sit down and actually talk to your children. That's the most important thing you can do as a parent. And otherwise, your kids, and I don't care what age, 13, 14, 15, they're going to learn about the cannabis product from somebody. Shouldn't it be the one person who's unconditionally in their lives forever? It sure makes it. And don't be lazy about it. There's this thing called Google, right? You could go on Google and you could find out a million things, both negative and positive about this plant now. There's so many different research studies out there. Hey, Andrew, how many research studies have you seen that have been used by both sides of this argument?
Oh, not enough, I will say. And then I wanted to follow up education, research, information that you were saying, Jimmy, should not only be at the forefront, it should, this is me at the policy side. It needs to be mandated. So maybe even if the parents are the best they can, or maybe they're not, every time you walk into a dispensary, a store, you should be forced down your throat the information that is needed. Because, even I don't know about other people's states, even in Maryland, maybe the bud tenders, as, they say, they're not the most informed people. They're like, oh, hey, man, this might be a bad impression. Hey, so this one has like a 31% THC content. So like, that's good and stuff. But no, we need information, science, research, education.
How about explaining what a terpene does?
Hey, they say, hey, 31% THC, man. I'm like, hey, well, what's the terpene profile on that? What's the percentage on each terpene. Like I want that mandate. You know, Maryland in the medical program, they mandate a terpene profile for every strain. So you can see exactly what it is. And not all states are as lucky. And then we should be informed about it. And so that requires from the state to fund initiatives like that.
Right. Well, look, you know, they funded a lot looking for reasons to ban it. The substance abuse community has been funding a lot of the research on cannabis over the last few decades, looking for reasons to ban it. There must be something negative in this. And here it is now legal in going to be 22 states tomorrow. So look, I'm all about education. That's what it's all about. That's what I'm all about. That's really one of the reasons why I started this damn company, because I want to share the knowledge of people from this show, from our news staff, from the science and research world, like Dr. Marion McNabb, Dr. Uma Dhanabalan, who was with us in the very beginning of all this. You know, there's plenty of people out there that know about this plant and how best to use it and what it will do to you one way or another. And guess what? We're all part of the largest clinical study of a medicine in history right now. That's what's going on in this country. We're human beings. We're those of us that use it for medicinal purposes every night to sleep or to get rid of our chronic pain or whatever. People like Andrew who have had to overcome epilepsy and have used it that way. I know people that have Crohn's disease that are taking 100 milligrams a day just to maintain their normalcy in their lives. It works. You just have to learn how best to use it. It isn't recreational. It's a medicine. It's very simple. It's a medicine, you know? Anyway, we're going to wrap this thing up because I'm out of time anyway. Andrew, great to talk with you. Brandon, always.
Likewise.
Rick, you are welcome here, as you know, on any Friday. And we will be here every Friday with a really live talk show about the business of cannabis. We call it Green Rush. But now you're going to have a little treat. If you want to hang in and check it out, we're going to run the Live from the Summit show with my old pal, Mike Adams, and myself. And I got to tell you, if you don't know who Mike Adams is, he's still one of the funniest people on earth. And if you think that you know, for whatever you think of me as a talent, as a talk show host, I was an Emmy award-winning sportscaster at one point in my career, I swear. Okay. And there will be clips of my act during that show live from the summit and also from Mike's show that was Sports World that we were both on and involved with back in the 90s on New England Cable News. So for everybody here at Pro Cannabis Media, thank you again for the support. And remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Coming up on We Talk News this week, 420 is history, but not before some firsts, like an advertisement in Times Square for the best seeds in the world. And the unofficial cannabis holiday did set records for sales, but crashes the Dutchy sales tracking platform. It's official. Delaware becomes the 22nd adult use legal state, and Minnesota is just one House vote away from becoming the 23rd. Plus, is there bipartisan life support for safe banking? Also in Congress, cannabis research for veterans gets turned down along party lines. And a record-holding U.S. long jumper gets suspended and her jumping records expunged for testing positive for weed. All that and more coming up on We Talk News with Elena Pinto next.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
After a week off to observe the high holiday of April 20th, this is Weed Talk News, and I'm Elena Pinto. Usually, more cannabis is sold on April 20th than any other single day of the year, and that was true again, according to data collector called Headset. This year, many retailers extended their 420 deals through the week, but check out this cool map created by Headset. This shows the intensity of sales during the day of April 20th, and like a weather map, the darker the colors, the more weed was sold, with the East Coast leading the way until the end of the day in the West. Makes sense. Headset data reported that sales were roughly twice what a typical Thursday brings in around the country, and another sales tracker platform called Cova said total sales in the US for that day were up by 40%. Obviously, there are more legal states, and that drives more sales, and that trend is continuing. In fact, Fortune magazine predicts that 2023 will be the biggest year for the industry, with sales in excess of $33 billion with a B dollars. One of those new states, Delaware. The governor of that state, John Carney, might not like it or even signed it, but his state legislature said yes to adult use. Therefore, Delaware becomes the 22nd state in the union to go legal. Now, by the time we release this news show, Minnesota might become the 23rd adult use legal state, as that state's House of Representatives passed a legalization bill by a 71 to 59 vote, and their Senate is supposed to do the same. Unlike Delaware, their governor, Tim Walz, is ready to sign it into law. So once again, states are taking the contradicting laws about cannabis into their own hands. There is some movement for reform on the federal level, and Andrew Behringer has more from DC and Maryland.
Hello, my name is Andrew Behringer, and you are watching We Talk News. A recent cannabis research bill was blocked by the Senate Republicans at the federal level. The Veteran Affairs Medicinal Cannabis Research Act, which primarily focuses on research only of cannabis-related medicine for our veterans, was rejected on a Wednesday, vote 57 to 42. Now, a little bit of history on this bill. It actually cleared the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee in February, but somehow did not make it and get 60 votes as needed to be approved by the Senate. Hopefully, this bill, which will help our veterans and just the research, will get another chance in the Senate. Now on to some more positive news. The Cannabis Safe Banking Bill is back in the headlines. Now, I don't know if a lot of you are aware, but the Safe Banking Act is a bill that has been bounced around the last couple of years in the legislative sessions. Not unfortunately, but fortunately enough, this time around, it's not just on one side. The House and the Senate have both submitted bills at the same time on each side, with bipartisan support on each side. The Senate bill has 2 main sponsors and 38 co-sponsors. Wow, that is a heck of a lot of co-sponsors. And the House has 2 sponsors and 8 co-sponsors. Now that should give us a very, very strong gut feeling that this time around, cannabis industry members will have access to safe banking. The latest versions include safe harbor laws extended to community development financial institutions and minority depository institutions, as well as anyone who works in the cannabis industry will get access to federally backed mortgages and not have to worry about that. Now, those are little caveats in the recent bill, and hopefully these bills, with the bipartisan support that they are receiving on both the House and the Senate side, will make some kind of progress and eventually help the cannabis industry. Well, that's all I have for you this week. Thank you for tuning in to We Talk News. Once again, I am Andrew Behringer, and have a great day.
While there is now more money in the cannabis industry than any other time in our history, greed and pay-for-play scandals continue to rock cannabis. That is certainly true in the state of Michigan. We get more on this story from that state's executive director of NORML, Rick Thompson.
Hello, everyone. This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News. Let's begin. Rick Johnson pled guilty to bribery and corruption charges in a Grand Rapids federal court on Tuesday. The former Speaker of the Michigan House and former chairman of the Marijuana Review Board admitted his guilt in a scheme whereby wealthy industry players paid himself and his wife thousands of dollars to gain early advantage in the licensing process during the start of the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act, which was the 2016 law enabling businesses to serve the state's patient and caregiver populations. Last week, financier John Delale also pled guilty to the scheme involving free travel and kickbacks to Johnson and his wife. Next week, 2 lobbyists will have their chance to enter guilty pleas for their part in arranging payments from cannabis companies to the former speaker. Johnson will be sentenced at a hearing scheduled for several months from now. Johnson, who is 70 years old, is expected to get no jail time for his crimes. Part of the plea deal arranged between Johnson's attorneys and the federal prosecutors is that his wife will not be charged and that Johnson will ask for a sentencing reduction at the upcoming hearing, which the feds will not object to. The criminal investigation is still ongoing, and insiders believe more people will be charged with crimes related to influence peddling within the state legislature regarding the growing cannabis industry. Johnson is cooperating with investigators. 2 cannabis companies which gave money to influence lawmakers have yet to be named, and one of them is suspected to be Green Peak or Skymint. The giant in-state cannabis company is in serious financial trouble and has been placed in receivership as creditors try to squeeze every penny from the failing cannabis company. Last week, Skymint parted ways with their long-term leader and face of the company, Jeff Radway. Some are speculating that the departure heralds more legal trouble for Radway and Skymint. At the time of Johnson's crimes, Green Peak was throwing money at lawmakers and local officials as they tried to establish laws and partnerships in order to create a monopolistic stranglehold on the emergent industry. There will be more news to come. On Tuesday of this week, the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association held their spring event at the Kellogg Center in East Lansing. Hundreds of cannabis industry and community participants attended. Notable speeches were made, including one from Representative Kevin Coleman, who revealed he's running for mayor of Westland. Coleman is in his 3rd and final term in the state house and has been a valuable co-sponsor for some pro-cannabis legislation introduced in the last few sessions. Senator Jeff Irwin came directly from a Senate committee meeting and encouraged attendees to remember where they came from and to envision the future of the cannabis industry. Longtime cannabis lobbyist Kevin McKinney related a few stories about the state's lobbying industry, emphasizing that some people have become far too casual in the way they ignore regulations, and some of those people may be soliciting donations or favors from current cannabis industry companies. ACT Labs founder Bob Miller introduced the Truth in Testing program, a concept whereby cannabis testing labs would agree to adhere to common standards and methods in exchange for being recognized by the industry as a lab which is doing it right. Now, that recognition will come as a logo or an image placed on cannabis packaging to indicate the test results of that product are more trustworthy. Hostess and MC Robin Snyder of the Cannabis Industry Association did a fantastic job of making the event work well. Kudos to her team. And here's looking forward to the MICIA Summer Annual. Well, our final story for today is another one of greed. Everyone knows April 20 is the cannabis industry's national holiday, and sales for cannabis products go through the roof on that day. Every cannabis retailer wants to be open, but what if you haven't received your official license to operate from the city yet? You probably just stay closed, right? Well, not if you're Jars Cannabis Company in Monroe. Now realize that Jars doesn't even have their name on the building yet, according to WTVG, nor do they have a license to operate retail, but the doors were popped open on 4/20. Now this came as a surprise to their neighbors in the strip mall that they're in, and to city officials as well. Jars is now accused of 3 different violations, including operating a special event without a permit, installing improper and unapproved signage, and violating the noise ordinance. The headline on the Channel 13 Action News piece is, Michigan marijuana shop may lose license after 4/20 event. And that may very well be true. Council is meeting in Monroe on Tuesday of next week to determine the punishment facing Jars for trying to game the system for some 4/20 profit. And that's it for the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News.
As legal states come on board legally for adult use sales, we are starting to see more and more out-of-state companies expanding into the new states. Hypnotize New Jersey is a prime example as they are trying to expand to Mount Laurel. And Jill Goldsberry has our Garden State Cannabis Report.
Hey guys, it's Jill from Weed Talk News, New Jersey, and here's what's happening in New Jersey cannabis. A Michigan firm, Hypnotize New Jersey, LLC, wants to open up a weed shop in a vacant office building on Church Street in Fellowship Road, according to an application before Mount Laurel, New Jersey's planning board. It seems there may have been an issue because it's less than a mile away from a cluster of 3 proposed dispensaries near Church Road's intersection. The planning board is considering the application at its May 4th meeting, and we will find out what happens from there. In other news, in Jersey City, City Council vote narrowly confirmed applicant Chelsea Duffy's application for her planned marijuana dispensary. The vote was 6 in favor, 1 against, and 2 abstentions. The confirmation vote came after months of setbacks, including a rejection last fall, which Duffy decided to sue the city and won the order to get her retail dispensary application reinstated so that it could be considered by Ward East Councilman James Solomon. While there are now about 24 cannabis-related businesses with city approval, none of them have opened yet for business. So that's another story right there. But the confirmation vote came after months of setbacks, like I said, where Duffy sued the city, won the right to get her retail dispensary application reinstated so that it could be considered by council. And we will just wait currently for the date of her opening, and we will keep you posted. I'm Jill Goldsberry for Weed Talk News, New Jersey. Thanks for watching.
Over in Europe, Germany continues to get most of the attention and expansion action. There's another country, though, that is moving toward legalization, and it's Finland. And sure enough, on 4/20, the Finns made a move in the legal direction. Our European correspondent is Lex Pelger.
I'm Lex Pelger from White Whale Creation with this week's European Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. In Finland, on 4/20 itself, a citizens' initiative passed the 50,000 signatures needed to force the parliament to consider legislation of the use, possession, personal cultivation, manufacture, and sale of cannabis in Finland, subject to age restrictions. This has happened previously in 2019, and after a few years of wrangling, the parliament's Legal Affairs Committee finally voted to reject it. But as the activist and researcher Alexi Hupli said, now they have to deal with it again. The wind is blowing in their favor. A recent survey of the Finnish population found that 53% favor cannabis decriminalization and a majority also favor medicinal cannabis. In other Finnish news, the country has moved to halt the sale of HHC, hexahydrocannabinol, an intoxicating cannabinoid that can be produced from hemp. Often found in head shops, HHC was being marketed as a replacement for THC, but no longer. Their neighbor Sweden is reportedly about to follow suit. Then, in Germany, amidst all the chatter about their adult use cannabis program, a doctor in Munich will be going to prison for 3 years after overprescribing cannabis to 539 alleged patients. Apparently, he became known as a cannabis doctor and wasn't even examining the patients anymore. He would simply charge them 120 euros for their prescription and made almost 50,000 euros off the scheme. That's the European Cannabis Report for this week. For more on the science side, see my newsletter on Substack, Cannabinoids and the People. I'm Lex Pelger from White Whale Creations reporting for Weed Talk News.
And now let's check in with Brandon Jones. He has our Missouri report this week, and he is at the NFL Draft.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones from Be Green Distribution with Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. And yes, I am live at the NFL Draft in Kansas City. No, you can't smoke on this side of the fence, but if you're just on the other side, right outside the gate, you can definitely consume your cannabis. There might be people consuming inside. I don't know. But as you can tell, Kansas City is popping right now with tons of events. Everything's going on here. It's a great time to be in the city. Had Wiz Khalifa obviously here for 420. Have this awesome event down here for the draft. All of downtown is having after parties. Everything is going on here in Kansas City. Can't wait for you guys to get out. Come check out the draft. Again, I'm Brandon Jones from Be Green Distribution. Missouri Cater Support for Weed Talk News.
Brandon Jones, Missouri Cannabis Report is brought to you by Baker Brands, a curated B2B marketplace for head shops and dispensaries.
It's becoming more and more the norm that workers in the cannabis industry are unionizing. It's true here in Massachusetts and now Arizona. And that's where Karen Black is with our new Arizona report.
Hi, everyone. I'm Karen Black with Greenfinger Consulting. Welcome to the Arizona Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. On 420, while many Arizonans were shopping for deep discounts and new products, some dispensary workers, along with a few state and local officials, attended an event in Central Phoenix hosted by the United Food and Commercial Workers Union Local 99. Proponents of unionizing claim corporate profits have become more important than patients' and customers' needs and workers' well-being, particularly since adult use sales began in January 2021. The union-sponsored Arizona Cannabis Workers Rising Project recently launched a petition demanding better pay, more fair or no tip pooling, healthcare and other benefits, harassment-free policies, and stricter security measures. As of press time, the petition had 97 signatures, falling short of their goal of 100. UFCW 99 currently represents at least 5 cannabis-related businesses here in the Copper State. Arizona, which recorded $1.4 billion in marijuana sales in 2022, is a right-to-work state. C4 Laboratories, a leading cannabis testing facility based here in Scottsdale, was acquired by California's SC Labs on April 24th. All C4 employees will join SC Labs, which has cannabis and/or hemp testing labs in its home state, along with Michigan, Oregon, and Colorado. The Science of Psychedelics and Spiritual Medicine Conference is scheduled to be held April 28th through 30th in downtown Phoenix. The agenda is jam-packed with speakers from many different backgrounds covering a variety of topics. There are still a few in-person tickets available, and the conference will be streamed live to virtual ticket holders. Organizers are also offering an option to purchase the recording after the event. For more information, visit thescienceofpsychedelics.com. That's it for this week's Arizona Cannabis Report. I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting, reporting for Weed Talk News.
A few weeks ago, Weed Week reported on a story involving the Cookies CEO Berner, aka Gilbert Millam. Now the rapper and entrepreneur is finally responding. In an Instagram video post this week, Berner said the allegations of pervasive self-dealing with millions of dollars in personal benefits and kickbacks is BS. Berner also said he was looking forward to his day in court to prove his innocence. But back here in New England, the state of Vermont has lost one of its most well-known cannabis advocates, Dr. Bob Melamede. And Jessie Lynn Dolan has more from the Green Mountain State.
I'm Jessie Lynn Dolan from Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the Weed Talk News Vermont Report. Cannabis activist and genetic researcher Dr. Bob Melamede died on April 19th at 4:20 p.m., 75 years young, after complications from a stroke he suffered last year. Melamede was considered an expert on the endocannabinoid system and taught at both the University of Vermont and Colorado Springs. He was a well-known international speaker and advocate to the curative and anti-aging properties of cannabis. Dr. Bob will be forever honored and remembered, not just in the small state of Vermont, but throughout the world, where he touched countless lives and supported patients endlessly. Thank you, Dr. Bob, for your work. We all hope Dr. Bob celebrated his first 420 in a much better place. In other Vermont highlights, at this month's Cannabis Control Board meeting, the board voted to close Tier 5 indoor cultivation license applications, as well as approving 29 new licenses. That's the Vermont Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
The Vermont Cannabis Report is supported by another Green Mountain business, Cannatrol, winner of High Times Best Dry Cure System. Check them out at cannatrolls.com.
Now we all know that Canada was the first G7 nation to legalize cannabis federally. But since then, the entire industry has been mismanaged due to a number of factors. The original law is supposed to allow citizens to grow up to 4 plants of their own, but now the Quebec Supreme Court is saying not so fast. Debbie Facey has our Canadian report.
Hi, this is Debbie Facey with Weed Talk News, coming at you with the Canadian Toke of the Week. I hope you all had an amazing 420. I have to say that I did. There were enough events going on in Canada, but at the same time, they were all scattered, especially here in Toronto, Ontario, I should say, sorry. But at the same time, I do hope you all had a great 420 and you're having a great week. So in Canada, as of right now, for this week, we have 2 stories. So the Okanagan UK researchers have found that there is a new pathogen that is being, not created, that is being found within the roots of most of the cannabis plants that are being grown in some of these facilities. That pathogen is called black rot. So it's basically making the plant a proactive, I want to say, host of being able to have these pathogens attached to its roots and make it ineffective to be able to be smoked, and also infected to be able to actually just have around any other plants, because of the fact that it would transfer. The one thing that they did realize is that most of these facilities and LPs, I should say, aren't aware of this new or this upcoming black rot pathogen that they have found, due to the fact that most of them aren't necessarily looking at the roots once the plant has been grown. This is something that Okanagan is hoping that most researchers, or I should say LPs, are starting to look at and putting into effect, due to the fact that it is harmful for both the other plants that are growing in the room and for any other of the cannabis consumers that are going to be smoking it. Next, what we have is the OCS, so the Ontario Cannabis Society, is implementing a new, I want to say, plan where they are creating a not-for-profit and impact in order to create a more diverse, as well as a sustainable and a more knowledgeable team, budtenders, LPs, facilities, just cannabis throughout all Ontario, Canada. This is something that they are trying to get all across the board in sync, especially due to the fact that there are some new laws that are going to be implemented, some new laws that can be taken away, as well as brands, labels, and LPs unfortunately closing or restructuring. So with the OCS having this new non-for-profit in place, they are hoping that it is going to not only expand the cannabis industry in the way where they're only going to gain more by the knowledge and the expansion of the diversity and sustainability, but they're also hoping for the OCS to be able to actually have a ground when it comes to the cannabis industry. So, once again, this is Debbie Facey coming at you with the Canadian Talk of the Week. I hope you have a great one.
In Massachusetts, there's been another layoff at another dispensary. Plus, can you name 2 of the top 15 cannabis-friendly cities in the USA? If you guessed Boston and Hartford, Connecticut, you are right. PCM founder Jimmy Young has our Bay State Cannabis Report.
Thanks, Elena. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, reporting for Weed Talk News. And this is the Massachusetts Cannabis Report, sponsored by Holyoke Cannabis, the #1 dispensary in Holyoke. Now, that Western Mass community has a new player in town, or rather, delivering it out of town. The Blaze Express opened for business and delivery this week out in Holyoke. Now, also out in Western Mass is INSA, a dispensary with locations in East Hampton and Springfield. Well, INSA has laid off a number of employees. CEO Peter Gallagher made that announcement this week, citing out-of-state competition as the reason for the layoff. Meanwhile, back in the 617 area code, Ascend in Boston is facing some disgruntled employees. Many of them were outside that location in North Station protesting unfair labor practices and tactics like the claim of keeping their tips. This is one of the reasons why unions are finding their way into cannabis dispensaries in the Bay State. And finally, if you had to name 2 of the top 15 cities for cannabis in the U.S., do you think 2 New England cities might make the list of the top 15? I didn't, but they did. According to Real Estate Witch, an online publication of Clever Real Estate, or Cleaver Real Estate, Portland, Oregon is the most weed-friendly cannabis city in America. The 2 from New England, Boston at 13 and Hartford, Connecticut at 15. So what were the researchers looking for? Metrics like pricing, the number of doctors prescribing cannabis for 100,000 people, or the number of total dispensaries in the state and or the city. And get this, how many Taco Bells are there for 100,000 residents? I'm not kidding. Taco Bell. I don't make that stuff up. That's this week's Bay State Cannabis Report, brought to you by Holyoke Cannabis. I'm Jimmy Young reporting for Weed Talk News.
Bay State Cannabis Report is supported by Holyoke Cannabis, Holyoke's finest cannabis recreational experience.
Hello, everyone. I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's Cannabis Stock Report for Weed Talk News. Safe Banking Act, that's been reintroduced into Congress, and that stands for the Secure and Fair Enforcement Banking Act. And that prohibits a federal banking regulator from penalizing an institution for providing banking services for a cannabis-related business. So this made all the cannabis stocks curl up and start to move in the right direction. Now we're going to look at Canopy Growth's stock chart because it was in the basement and it was trading around 131, but it's looking really good. It wants to pop out of the basement. It wants to go on a run. I'm keeping my eye on it. You should too. And all the cannabis stocks are starting to look really good for a quick run at least. So check them out. And that's this week's Cannabis Stock Report. Reporting for Weed Talk News, I'm Doug Miller.
And finally, a U.S. long jumper has been suspended for 1 month for testing positive for cannabis. Tara Davis Woodhall recently won the USA Long Jump Championship in New Mexico with a jump of 6.99 meters or 22.9 feet. When her test came up positive, the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency rescinded her championship and gave her a 1-month suspension. You might remember that sprinter Shaquiri Richardson also tested positive for cannabis right before the Olympics and had to give up her spot. Now, with the NBA stopping their testing for weed and many other major professional leagues are delisting cannabis as a controlled substance, you would think our nation's track and field athletes should be treated the same way. But nothing is easy in the cannabis industry. And that's this week's Weed Talk News. I'm Elena Pinto, and remember, it is a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly.
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore. So I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weejits filtration system. What? The Weejits.com, Weejits, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product.
Both cool the smoke from 1300 degrees to just 90 into your lungs. Plus, the maze pipe and pre-roll filters get rid of all the gunk that you just don't want in your lungs if you can help it.
Add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weejits.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
We are a cultivation through to consumption lifestyle brand for the cannabis industry. Of course, the crown jewel in our product line is the Armoire home grow system. So now with Green Goddess Supply, we can take you everywhere from growing it in the Armoire right through to storing it, consuming it, rolling it, storing it, you name it, A to Z. Our goal is to enable everybody and anybody anywhere to be able to produce their own organic flower quickly, easily, discreetly, and inexpensively.
You would think that it is. However, there's quite a bit of debate right now in the accounting industry when it relates to cannabis with this exact question. I'm part of a few different networking groups that are solely accountants for cannabis companies. And there's been quite a bit of back and forth in those communities and discussion regarding whether 280E, if it went away, if the administration legalized cannabis or took it off of Schedule 1, what would happen? And it could go either way right now. The debate is it could make the accountant's life much easier. That's what a lot of the inexperienced accountants are saying right now, it seems, whereas the accountants that have been in this industry for a while and have gone through the same thing that happened with hemp a few years ago are saying that it actually will make lives more difficult, because when hemp became declassified a while back, the accounting became more complicated.